Yo, what's up guys? Every now and then I like to switch it up by making a comparison video, and it seemed like a great idea to compare the original Killing Floor 1 and its sequel Killing Floor 2. Surprisingly, there aren't many comparison videos like this, so we're gonna make history and do a round by round comparison with both games competing in certain categories like the gameplay and the maps. For the first round, let's start with something simple and important for any Killing Floor game, and that's the perks. The class system that keeps me coming back and adds a lot to the game. Killing Floor 1 introduced these perks with 7 different perks that you can level up. It's a simple system that works, with my biggest criticism being that you have to do specific things to level up, like welding doors, and it just takes too long to level up certain perks at higher levels. Of course, Killing Floor 2 is going to have more perks, but none of them are actually new, because a perk in Killing Floor 1 like Sharpshooter was a mix of Sharpshooter and Gunslinger. So they basically have the same perks, but I like how Killing Floor 2 made perks more specific instead of specializing in 2 things. This adds a lot more progression, and they fixed my criticisms and made it more consistent to level up. All you need is XP, those perk challenges are optional. Killing Floor 2 simply improved an already working system, and although it didn't add any real new perks, the improvements were enough to win the first round. Now, something that could be a big deal for a game like this is the atmosphere and presentation. For this round, it seemed unfair to compare the graphics for obvious reasons, so let's compare something that's more fair, like the vibe and atmosphere. You see, Killing Floor 1 was made a long time ago, and not to say the graphics directly affect the atmosphere, games just had a different feel and look to them back then. I'm someone who wants to appreciate both games for what they are, so this might look outdated to some of you, but I still appreciate it. Killing Floor 2 is gonna have better graphics by default, but it's more notable that it has more of a futuristic or sci-fi look to it. Nothing too crazy, but it's definitely new direction compared to Killing Floor 1. It might be a preference, but I'm not blinded by graphics, and I'm definitely leaning towards the raw and gritty atmosphere of Killing Floor 1 enough to give it the point. It reminds me of the first Left 4 Dead or Call of Duty World at War. It's just a perfect FPS horror vibe. But something that goes hand in hand with the presentation, for round 3, let's compare the maps. I'm talking about the maps themselves, not just how they look. But surprisingly, Killing Floor 2 has 26 maps and Killing Floor 1 has 34 maps. I thought it'd be the other way around. But this is when things can get a little tricky. There can be multiple things for what makes a Killing Floor map good. Personally, I just want a decent camping spot, but overall, I pretty much like all of the maps in both games. But if I'm gonna be honest, some of my favorite spots in Killing Floor 1 either exploit the mechanics like welding messing with the spawns, or some spots feel lucky with the enemy spawns or something. I know the veterans are gonna hate me for this one. Like, I can agree that a lot of Killing Floor 1's maps are better, but it seems like Killing Floor 2 is more consistent with its maps, which can be viewed as a gift and a curse, but it really feels like I beat a map when I kill the boss instead of just using some OP exploitive strategy. I understand the first game is older, and it might even have some better maps by design, but I'm gonna give the first point to Killing Floor 2 for being more consistent with the spawns and making the maps less exploitive, so it feels like you're playing them how they're meant to be played. Let me know if you agree. I'm also comparing the maps with the footage if you couldn't tell by now, but something that might make you disagree with the last thing I said depends on how you feel about the gameplay. Some people think the maps are better in Killing Floor 1, so the gameplay should be better too, right? Well, yes and no. By now we can tell that there's big differences with both games, like less being more in Killing Floor 1 with the perks, and that better graphics doesn't automatically mean better atmosphere for Killing Floor 2. So with the gameplay, I really had to try hard not to call it a tie. Now hear me out, I know the Killing Floor 2 fans are calling me crazy right now, but I want you to see where I'm coming from. Like, Killing Floor 2 does have better gunplay, more fluid movement, and sharpens almost everything in the gameplay compared to the first game, but it's also a lot more intense, and you can argue that the Zeds being like crackheads isn't better. Some would argue there's a lot more strategy having to pull out your knife in Killing Floor 1 because you can't sprint, and that you have to think strategically about dealing with the Zeds. It feels more grounded, you know what I mean? I personally like the gameplay of both, but I can see where those Killing Floor 1 veterans are coming from. And if I wanted to add another perspective, you can say that Killing Floor 1 did a lot for the series, improving the game from the original mod and being the first real game in the series to build off of, while some would say Killing Floor 2 barely built off Killing Floor 1 gameplay-wise. Like, sure, you can parry with melee weapons and enemies get new abilities on harder difficulties, but they mostly only improved on what they had in Killing Floor 1 instead of adding new things like attachments or something. Like, if you compare World at War Zombies to Black Ops 1 or Black Ops 3, they added a lot to the gameplay and how you play the game. This gameplay round might be a lot, but overall Killing Floor 2 might be smoother and have more updated gameplay, but I can see the argument that Killing Floor 1 had a better pace and that the second game didn't build off of it as much as it should have. I'm giving this controversial round to Killing Floor 1. But now we finally made it to the last round, and I like you more than anyone who didn't make it this far. I'd appreciate a like if you've been enjoying yourself. But here we are with the first two Killing Floor games going head to head to see who's the best, and for the last round, we're talking about replayability, which can be subjective, so let's talk about some facts. A lot of replayability can come from leveling up, achievements, the amount of content and things to do or strive for. Like I said earlier, it's surprising that Killing Floor 1 has more maps, so that definitely helps with playing the game more. And I did say that it takes longer to level up the perks in the first game, so that could be seen as replayability, right? Well, you're not wrong, but at a certain point, some replayability doesn't have enough substance, you know? Like, it does take longer to level up perks in Killing Floor 1, but it starts to feel like a grind compared to the second game where it feels more smooth and consistent to level up, and the progression doesn't feel like a brick wall once you hit a certain level. Not to mention that Killing Floor 2 has more players, and something that I avoided saying for round 3 is that it has more custom maps and mods. Both have a lot, but you're more likely to get a new map on the second game than the first. And something that's a big factor in the replayability is the fun factor. Like, what if you just enjoy Killing Floor 1 more so you have a lot more playtime? That can be a fair point if one game is noticeably that much worse or better than the other, but that seems more personal than critical. Like, I can have something wrong with my brain and play a shit ton of any game and say it has a shit ton of replayability just because I played it, but that's not objective. Some replayability is objective, like having more perks to level up and more weapons to use. So I understand that Killing Floor 1 might have more replayability to those who enjoy it more. I just think Killing Floor 2 has more replayability on paper. I have a ton of respect for the first game, but my fun factor and replayability lean towards Killing Floor 2. It just has some modern and updated features that I get too comfortable with. It didn't simply do everything better than the first game, but what it did improve on helped a lot with the replayability and just kept me on the game more. So I have to give this last and final point to Killing Floor 2. Well, there you guys have it. Killing Floor 2 is the winner of this round by round comparison. This one was actually tougher than you think. A lot of us play Killing Floor 2 more, but it's not the obvious winner. I really do understand where those Killing Floor 1 veterans are coming from, and I wouldn't say they're wrong if they think it's better than the sequel. If you enjoy both games to their fullest potential, the first one is probably better at its core. But I think it's harder for most of us to do that with the first game. It can remind me the difference between Grand Theft Auto 2 and 3. Let's just say this one was technically better. This is still what we really want. Like, there's a huge difference between someone who plays the first couple of Fallout games and someone who plays Fallout 4 and 76. I can agree that some games are technically better, but some games are just more fun and more accessible. That's why this one is a little tricky. I think Killing Floor 2 wins as an overall package, but Killing Floor 1 can be considered the better game if you're a passionate nerd like me and care about all the little things. One of the things you might know more about me is the map design or other reasons why the first game might be objectively better than the second. I'm giving the overall W to Killing Floor 2, but if you think I'm wrong, let me know why. I want to know. Like, I'm really curious what the community thinks and if I missed the mark on anything. I'm somewhere in between a casual and a veteran. I've been casually playing since 2015 and I do my research. So drop a comment with your opinion. Here's some comments from my last Killing Floor video, and I seriously appreciate all the support from the community. You guys motivate me so much and are the reason I'm making this video. That's why I'm showing some love and giving you guys a spotlight. Shout out to the homie for being so supportive, and shout out to my first super thanks. This meant a lot. So be sure to drop a comment if you want a chance to appear in my next Killing Floor video, or if you just want to get the discussion going. Which Killing Floor do you think is better? Either way, I knew I had to make this video when I didn't see one like it. There might be a Killing Floor commentary comparison video after me, but there won't be one before me. It's called Making History. And if you want to continue to make history with me, then be sure to subscribe. I already made a review on both games if you want some more depth, but I can't wait to compare both of these games to Killing Floor 3. Thanks for watching, you Zed Killers. Peace.